Hi everybody, my name is Altin Sencalar and I'm a jazz trombonist based out of the Austin, Texas area. I'm also on faculty at the University of Mary Hardin Baylor in Belton, Texas, where I'm the director of jazz ensembles and trombone instructor. Today's video is going to be covering the 2021-2022 Texas All-State Jazz Tenor Trombone Etudes for the TJEA jazz ensembles. This video is going to be talking about how to approach these etudes, some practice methods that I use and that you can use as well. This video is also going to cover some recordings that you should reference in order to become familiar with the styles of each etude. And lastly, it'll also have me demonstrating all of these etudes and how I would ideally perform them at my audition. So, if you have any questions, please make sure that you send me a message. I'll have all of my contact information at the end of this video. Okay everybody, so the first etude we're going to be talking about is by Bob Burnham, and he wrote this in the style of the bebop era of jazz. The bebop era of jazz is credited to both Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie as innovators and creators of the bebop language. However, there's many more that can be talked about. You know, some of the pictures that you see right now feature 4 trombonists that I consider to be great bebop people to look up to, as well as great trombonists to model your sound after. Obviously, there's only 4. I'm sure that you can find some more, but for right now, we have J.J. Johnson, Melba Liston, Carl Fontana, and Curtis Fuller. These trombonists, in my opinion, have made significant contributions to the bebop era, as well as the jazz trombone lineage. So let's get into this etude a little bit. So first off, the etude is based on the standard Donnelly, which is by Charlie Parker. Like I said, he's credited as one of the innovators and creators of the bebop language. The original recording is from 1947. Bebop is known for the virtuosic melodies and tempos, which is why people use the term bebop as a way to emulate how players used to move through the lines, you know, bebop, 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 as opposed to the swing era where there was a little bit more fundamental and basic melodies, such as Pennsylvania 6 5000, In the Mood, and many others. Bebop is also known as a light, nuanced music. It was born out of, like I said, virtuosic lines. However, in order to play virtuosically, you must play with agility and not think about how heavy each note is, but rather how perfect each line sounds and feels. As a trombonist, you want to consider lightness as opposed to heaviness. Sometimes we hear more air, but in this instance, you want to think about faster air and lightness and making sure that everything feels comfortable as well as sounding easy on the instrument. You also want to make sure that all the accents that you play are meant to be decorative and they're not the main focus. Accents are only brought out of smoothness. So for example, do you know why something sounds short? It's because something has been played longer. If everything is short, then you could call that long in another world. Or if everything is long, you could call that short. However, different articulations now inform all those other articulations. So for every long articulation, you need a short one, and vice versa. A couple more things on this etude, especially things for trombonists to consider. I want you to look at measures 3 and 4. Those housetop accents don't need to be heavy. In fact, they need to be brought out, but not overstated. Listen to this clip right here in order to get a better idea. Measures 7 and 8. The A-flat should grow in volume on each accent in order to capture that decrescendo following it. Like I said, for every short articulation, you need a long and vice versa, but for every loud passage of music, you need a soft passage of music. Measure 12. That turn in measure 12 doesn't need to be loud or heavy. it's a decorative inflection. It's not the main course, right? You don't want to have so many green beans on your steak plate that the steak looks small compared to the green beans. Same thing with turns and inflections in jazz. Make sure that the content shines. Measure 17 and 18. Those eighth note triplets can be played as turns or can be tongued as is. Once again, don't make more out of it than it needs to be. And my last point is talking specifically about a trombonism, alternate positions. You don't want to have to play alternate positions because you feel forced to. Now that takes away the actual comfort that alternate positions are meant to have. Only use an alternate position if that is both comfortable and sounds best. Obviously, most notes in their natural positions will sound better, but if it makes more sense, like a D in fourth position or an F in sixth, you want to think about where you're coming from and where you're going as opposed to just going to that alternate position. There's three parts to alternate positions: the note that you're coming from, the note that you're going to, and the note after your alternate position. Make sure that that all makes sense. If not, you want to make sure that you can find another way that's more efficient to play whatever line you're in. Lastly, I have some listening models that I think would be best whenever it comes to listening to bebop style as well as the sound of trombone within bebop. So listed is J.J. Johnson, and here's three solos: Pennies from Heaven, Mysterioso, and Coffee Pot. Melba Liston, Blues Melba, Insomnia, and You Don't Say. Curtis Fuller, Blue Train, Heart and Soul, and Pickup. And lastly, Carl Fontana, Beautiful Friendship, Untitled Blues, and Strike Up the Band. All of these recordings have influenced me in the way that I think about bebop, and it's imperative that you listen to as much as you can in order to have an informed ear and musical opinion. Okay, on to the next etude. Okay, on to Etude number 2. So this Etude was written by Bob Burnham once again, and he wrote it in the style of a ballad. So before you have 5 trombonists: Bill Watrous, as well as Vic Dickinson, Glenn Miller, Helen Woods, and Tommy Dorsey. These trombonists, in my opinion, have made huge contributions to the jazz trombone lineage as far as ballad playing. I'm sure some of you already know some of these trombonists and their names and faces because of different parts of their career. However, I wanted to highlight these trombonists in this style of music, especially for the trombone. So let's get into Etude number 2. So Etude number 2, I wanted to talk a little bit about trombone playing within a ballad style. Jazz ballads on the trombone should be similar to our approach with our Rochu and Bordoni studies. If you don't know what those are, Marco Bordoni was an opera singer, and his vocalese and arias were transcribed by Johannes Rochu, and they made a book of etudes for trombone because the trombone is one of the closest instruments to the human voice's range. So that means we're going to have a lot of air, we're going to make sure that we play as if we're singing, and we're going to make these phrasings as vocal as possible. This ballad also has some falls at the end of some of the notes. Make sure that you listen to players who use falls in their recordings. It's very important that we don't use the same kind of falls that we use in a big band or combo, or even genres like bebop, swing, or funk. We want to make sure that we're fitting the style and every inflection and nuance possible, because now this shows attention to detail and stylistic opinion that has now been informed. So in this ballad, we also have some short notes. Short notes exist in ballads. Not everything has to be long. In fact, I mentioned this in the first etude, but in order to have long notes, we must have short notes. And in order to have short notes, we must have long notes. So these balance one another out. You also want to make sure that just because you see a short note, whether it be housetop or staccato, that it's not abrasive. Remember, you need balancing between your articulations. So make it singable. On to the next bullet point. Does every note need vibrato? I would say that you should use your best ear judgment by referencing recordings that I'll talk about after the information portion of the slides. Now, do we need to use slide vibrato or jaw vibrato? Or should we only use one vibrato? These are choices that you can make once you've listened to enough players who play ballads, such as the recordings that I'll talk about after all this information. If there's too much vibrato, then does the vibrato have the same meaning as it would if you only put a couple of notes with vibrato? These are things that I would consider before making choices on how I'm going to end my phrases. Sometimes straight tone is just as beautiful. So think about, is this something that I need to add vibrato to? Or does the phrase already end beautifully enough to where I can end it with straight tone? Let your ear be the judge of that. Lastly, I'd like to point out this etude has a little bit of high register towards the end and a little bit in the middle. I would like for you to remember, you don't need a lot of air all the time. In fact, you can't use all that air that you would use in the mid register and the upper register, because then your air wouldn't have room to move fast enough in order to resonate the horn at whatever register you're at. So remember, it's not always about more air. Sometimes it's about faster air. If you're in the low register, yes, you need a wide column of air, and you don't need it to move as fast as you would in the upper register. But for this etude, you want to make sure that you have fast enough air moving, as opposed to a lot of air trying to go through a tiny little hole which goes into the horn. So, remember, faster, not more. So as I was talking about, I had some reference recordings that I think would be very helpful to your student's inner ear model for ballad playing as a trombonist. And here they are. We have Bill Watrous on Unforgettable, Body and Soul, and Too Little Time. We have Vic Dickinson, a full album titled Trombone Charlie. We have Tommy Dorsey, I'm Getting Sentimental Over You, In the Still of the Night, and If It's the Last Thing I Do. We also have Helen Woods on I Need My Man. You can also find that on the International Sweethearts of a Rhythm YouTube video. And there's a great documentary on that same group, of which Helen Woods was a part of. Lastly, we have recordings from Glenn Miller, Moonlight Becomes You, Moonlight Serenade, and I Know Why and So Do You. So, I hope that these recordings help, and I hope that your students are able to gain some stylization information from listening. Anyways, on to etude number 3. Alright, on to etude number 3. So this third etude was written by Eddie Lewis, and he wrote it in the style of a samba, which is referred to as the ballroom dance of the country of Brazil in South America. So above on the slide, you see 3 trombonists, who I feel exemplify how to play in a samba style, which was referred to as the ballroom dance of the country of Brazil located in South America. So, let's delve right in. So let's talk about how to play within the samba style as a trombonist. So first off, as I mentioned before, the samba style is out of Brazil, and like I said, it was known as a ballroom dance of the country. So because it's a dance, you want to imagine like you're playing for a bunch of dancers, which means the tempo has to stay consistent. It can't rush or drag. You have to find the pocket of groove. So that means you need to start listening to samba music in order to feel what that groove is supposed to feel like. I'll make sure to throw out the recordings that I feel are going to be best suited for students to have an introduction into samba, or to make them more knowledgeable of that style if they've already listened to samba music. So a couple of things that I want you to think about is trying to internalize this music and this etude by dancing and singing it. I know that kind of seems silly, however, you're adding another layer to internalizing this music faster and better. One of the first necessities for music was to provide dance and entertainment for people. This samba is no different. So, if you want to really internalize the music and understand what's going on, sing it and dance it. Similar to the Bebop Etude, you want to keep this etude light and agile, as we're going to be at a faster tempo and exploring some of the upper register as well as the mid. So you want to make sure that you preserve your energy for the lines as opposed to a lot of air or to the loudness of this etude. Remember, this is a dancing music, so you don't want to be a heavy dancer. Agility and lightness is the name of the game for samba music. So as far as articulations go, you want to make sure that your shorts aren't too short, and you want to make sure that your longs are agile. So that means lightness, just like the Bebop Etude. Remember, this is a dance music, and there's a lot of finesse to dancing as well as playing this music. So, lightness and agility. So now let's examine this etude. Measure 2. The turn should be indicative of the style. Don't play a turn that you would play in a bebop or swing style. Make sure that you listen to music that provides you an inner ear model for turns within that samba style. Think about singing through the more technical phrases such as pickups to measure 17 through that line. Try to make sure your singing is representative of both the samba style and eventually your playing. Remember, the trombone is the closest instrument to the human voice's range. If you find yourself running out of breath quicker than normal, you're too heavy or you're too loud for both singing and playing. Make sure you find the time and the groove within that time. You can be in time and not groove, but you can't groove and not be in time. So, make sure you find the groove and stay in there. Make sure to articulate and not rely on the trombone, natural slurs, or partials to do the work for you. That's not the style of this music. It's great to know that you have great flexibility, however, don't let your flexibility take over the things that you need to do, such as articulation on the trombone. The trombone can be just as clean as any other instrument. It just takes a little bit more work since we have a physical instrument. Do not allow yourself to use slurs as a means to play lazily. You want to make sure that you're able to articulate at each tempo that you're given. Because samba is such a well-respected dance, you want to make sure that you're just as articulate as the people who would dance this same dance. We've talked about this already, but make sure that your long articulations and short articulations inform one another. If you can get both of them down, now you have a provided brilliance within your sound, articulation, and feel. Lastly, this is a dance, so you want to make sure that you don't rush the upbeats, such as the last line, as well as the more technical passages. We want to know that you can play technical passages in time and in the groove. Remember, groove over time. You can be in time and not groove, but I've never heard of a band that can groove and not be in time. So above all else, make sure that you're grooving, so that way people can feel the style, which now makes people aware of your understanding of this music. Groove, articulation, and dance. That is the theme of this etude. Now, there are some recordings that I have written down for you to reference. These are of trombonists who I feel exemplify how to play samba and Brazilian music in general. So, I hope that you're able to grab something from these recordings, and I hope that your students have a fun time discovering them. I know I had a fun time revisiting some of these trombonists, such as Raul de Souza, and of course Frank Rosalino, and the many other Brazilian trombonists that you can find going through that YouTube rabbit hole of Brazilian trombone music. So, I hope that this helps. Thanks so much for tuning in for these 3 etudes. Alright everybody, well, I hope that this was helpful. I hope that this pointed you in the right direction as far as where to start and how to go from there. I also hope that you're able to get some new recordings out of this, such as listening to new artists that I mentioned before, and I hope that you're able to tackle this with now a little bit more confidence. So, once again, my name is Altin Sencalar, and I'm based here in the Austin, Texas area. You can also find me on the music faculty at University of Mary Hardin Baylor in Belton, Texas. If you have any questions, make sure that you drop your comments or questions below in the comment section, or reach out to your band director so that they can contact me on my information slide, which is going to be next. So, have a great one, and happy practicing.